Unafraid Show, Reister or Wrong. It's your boy George Reister in the building, and I got my man with me today. Some of you in Arizona know who he is, but my man Ralph Amsden. This is a guy who fits everything that Unafraid Show is about. Faith, family, food, fatherhood, and sports, like all wrapped into one. We're going to be coming to you every week. You guys, please make sure you swipe up, share the feed, like the feed. If you're listening to the podcast, share it with a friend. Ralph wrote an article last week, a great article about Tucker Carlson and manhood, stay-at-home dads, all kind of stuff, and he's going to have great things coming up as well. Thanks, Ralph. That was my introduction of you.
That was nice. The nicest introduction I've ever had in my life. I appreciate it.
So we are going to talk about some of the hottest things for today. First of all, we're talking about the Covington Catholic Boys. What's going on with them? Were they treated unfairly, like Trump says, or did they cause their own demise? How would the parents feel? How would you feel? And we're going to talk about Chris Brown and his rape allegations out in Paris, and how this is a fatherhood issue, and how we can fix this with our young men, and also our kids being exploited by these college football coaches offering scholarships to high school players. 12 and 13 years old getting scholarship offers that are non-binding, man. That's absolutely ridiculous. So I wanted to start with the Covington Catholic. And me and Ralph, we talk about all these things about fatherhood and all this. And first of all, Ralph, tell us what you thought about it. Because the kids, where they were in Washington, D.C., these Catholic kids from Cincinnati, they go to a archdiocese. They were there for the March for Life, which is a pro-life rally. And then that ran into the Indigenous Peoples March in Washington, D.C. And we all saw the viral video.
Yeah, I mean, I got to be honest. When I saw that video, I realized that it evoked emotions in a lot of people that were just like, oh, this is disrespectful, or, you know, this is gross, or this is indicative of the culture today and white privilege and the groupthink, and or you know, these kids weren't given a fair shake. All of these people are having all the same reactions, and the only thing I could think of is like, where are the teachers? Where are they? That was the only thing that popped into my head as somebody who used to be a high school teacher, as somebody who has been a chaperone on trips like this. Where was anybody at any point to step in and say, hey, kids, the bus isn't here yet. Just go sit over there, get out of this so that it doesn't end up a viral sensation and we don't look like idiots. Just you move over there. Same thing I do with my kids. When they're fighting in the back seat, hey, you look out that window, you look out that window. That was the only thing I could think of at the time. And, you know, and I feel, you know, my dad was raised on a reservation in central Montana. So I saw, you know, there were some issues that bubbled up in me there. But for the most part, I was just like, man, this was so avoidable. We don't even need to be having these debates about who was right and wrong and who did what, when, and whether or not these kids were disrespectful or what it has to do with culture as a whole. All we could have been talking about was the fact that, like, we could have been talking about any other subject, but instead we're talking about these kids. And I, in a way, I kind of feel for these kids, because 100 million people are all talking about them, who they are, their motivations, what they'll be from here. There seems to be not a lot of grace in this situation.
Ralph, I agree with that. See, they are kids. However, they're not naive. Like, I can't throw the naive, oh, these are little scared kids and they just didn't know what they were doing. Yo, if these teenagers, right? Because I have a blended family. And and I know from experience that if kids know that parents are fighting or that there are two different groups, they know that they can manipulate a situation. And they know how to push people's buttons and all these things. So yes, they're little punk teenage kids. But at the same time, they're not little scared kids. They know what the hell is going on. They know that these hats are going to elicit an emotional response. And my response to it was like, okay, the kids have the right to wear the hats. But at the same time, this is no different than the players kneeling and people kneeling at football games, baseball games, and people being upset about it. People have the right to do it. But at the same time, you know, when you do it, that people are going to have an emotional reaction to it, and it's not always going to go well.
Especially in Washington, D.C., when the only type of people that are in Washington, D.C. at any given time are people with very strong opinions, right? I mean, like, and you're there on the day of a march to voice your very strong opinion, while other people are there having a march to voice their very strong opinion. So it is, I think 2 years in, we can probably admit that those hats create quite a bit of divisiveness. Should you be able to wear it and not have people harass you? Sure, why not? But that we know that that's not the case. Should it be that big of a deal when, somebody kneels in protest for whatever reason? And this is something I get into all the time. I mean, if I was out there and I was a professional athlete and I decided to take a knee in just support of the fact that, like, police were under fire, if the issue was different, if the issue more closely aligned with the thing that you are more aligned with, I think that's a completely different ballgame. But at this point, we realize all of these things are triggering for people, right? And so you're out there, you got a giant group of kids all wearing these hats, and in everybody else's mind in those scenarios, they don't see kids, they see people who are making political statements of some way, shape, or form.
And they are, and I don't think the kids always fully grasp the magnitude of that. And I think that this goes along racial lines, which is, I think that some people of color, that they get upset because they feel like, wow, now these kids are so innocent, they don't know what they're doing. But then when you have a kid of color, they're like, oh, he knew what he was doing. He knew what he was doing. And I think that evokes some emotions along like the racial lines. But I wanted to go to the parents real quick. Like, if I was thinking, if this were my kid. Well, first of all, my kid wouldn't be walking around with a "Make America Great Again" hat. But I wanted to look at it like, if I were one of their parents, how would I feel about it? I was like, okay, hold up. I would be a little bit upset that my kid was being attacked. I mean, as we're naturally like wanting to defend our seed, we want to defend our family, all of these things. And then I was like, but then I would be more like you, Ralph. I'd be more mad at the chaperones. I'm like, where the hell are you? And what are you doing? And why didn't you do anything to prevent this situation?
Yes, instantly defensive. So that'd be my reaction in that situation. If one of my kids was involved, I would instantly become defensive, and then I would figure out what it was that I was defensive about. In the interim, it feels like an anvil was being dropped on these high school students, right? And I'll tell you a little story that goes along with what you were saying. There's a school here in Arizona that ended up on Fox News a couple of years ago because the school said you're not allowed to wear "Make America Great Again" stuff to the high school football game, and you're not allowed to have that as your theme. And the reason the school told them that they couldn't do that was because they were only making that the theme because their crosstown rival, Marcos de Niza, was largely Hispanic. Now,
wow.
the kids knew that they were trolling these other kids. It's been that way. They're both in Tempe, Arizona, both near Arizona State. It has been that way forever. And so all the Marcos de Niza kids knew that they were wearing "Make America Great Again" stuff to like chide at their heritage. All the Corona kids knew exactly what they were doing. But then it became about the fact that the school district wouldn't allow these kids to do what they wanted. Fox News picks it up, and all of a sudden it's a freedom issue, right? So the first thing that I would be upset about is probably that my kid was being attacked. But then I'd have to turn around and look at the fact that I think the school put my kids in a position to fail. There weren't enough chaperones to handle a situation like that. There seemed to be no understanding that when you're out there for political reasons, wearing political clothing, that you might get a political reaction. There's just a complete lack of preparedness that all of a sudden results in people doxing my family member or me getting calls at home and getting threatened and stuff like that.
Yep.
And I think that I would be more furious with the school than I would be with everybody else. And there'd be so much coming my way that I wouldn't know who to be upset with anyway. Because everybody's coming to these kids right now.
And here's the thing that I think that we screw up when it comes to freedoms and when these stories get picked up, like you just talked about the story that got picked up by Fox News and how this Covington Catholic thing has been covered, is that we look at it when it gets blown up to the national media, it gets blown up to a freedom issue as opposed to knowing the context behind it. And if you know these little kids are trying to be jerks and are trying to actually intentionally make fun of somebody, and then use it as a cover of, oh, this is just my political freedom. Like, that's where a lot of stuff gets messed up, because I think a lot of times that those things, that's where that line gets blurred, where I think that too many people call things racism. I think too many people call things sexism. Too many people call things all these other isms. But I think it gets blurred along those lines when you have people who know that these are hot button issues and they're like, okay, cool, I can cover it here. I can use this as an excuse if I get jammed up, because either this issue is my complexion, is my protection, or my complexion is my protection in this situation. So I can do whatever it is that I want to do. Just like the other day when when the Congress lady was on the Black Guys radio show, and she said, oh, this is just your white privilege talking. And like, that was a time when she tried to use her complexion as her protection, which is same thing. White people do it sometimes. Hispanic people do it sometimes. And you always have to be careful to know the intent behind things than just allowing people excuses to be crappy people.
Well, and you and I talked about this beforehand. When you're in a group and you're all riled up like that, I mean, imagine you're in a situation where you're with your team in college or the NFL. You guys are getting all fired up to run out on the field, and somebody from the opposite team walks into the locker room at just that time. You know, yep. Is everything that you – because I see a lot of people blaming the parents, right? Is everything that your parents taught you in that situation gonna come into play there? Are you gonna go sit by your locker while somebody else handles that situation? Or are you gonna jump in with the rest of the group and push this dude out of your locker?
You have to, otherwise you will be chastised. And it takes a very strong person, and it's where fatherhood, leadership, I mean, and even motherhood as well, like character has to be taught. Like, you have to do the right thing for the sake of doing the right thing, as even when there's peer pressure, even when it doesn't feel good, and you're going to be chastised by your friends. Like, you have to be willing to stand up, and we have to prepare our kids for that.
I mean, so let's say a situation comes up where your kid's going to be going on a field trip to Washington D.C. I mean, given this situation, are you? I know that I'm in a situation now where I'd be like, well, I'm chaperoning this.
Oh, hell yeah.
And I'm going to be cracking the whip the entire time on everything.
Yeah, and if I were the school, as much as I want to protect people's freedoms, at the same time, like, you have to make sure that you set rules in place the way these things don't happen. And we just got a comment in that said the right thing isn't always the cool thing. And that's right. And that's where character and all these things come along. But Ralph, I wanted to ask you this, because so we saw the kids in the face of the Indigenous People March guy who was banging the drum.
Yes.
And there was another issue that had nothing to do with race, had nothing to do with any of this, that I noticed with that. That was kind of disrespectful to an elder.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like that if you're a kid, like, you just don't jump up in some grown man's face because the main reason why you don't do that, or it shouldn't be taught to do that, because you may get treated like a grown man. Like, if you jump up there like a grown man, sometimes kids, they can get put down like grown men, but then the adult would be wrong, and then the parents would be mad at the adult instead of chastising their kid like, yo, kid, what are you doing getting in that grown man's face?
And I think part of the issue here, I mean, and I think that race does come into play, at least in this one specific instance, race and ignorance of culture. Because, you know, if you don't have that in your culture, that elders are not only like, forget sacred, but not to be trifled with. like Grandpa gets to say what Grandpa gets to say, Grandpa gets to eat first. Like those type of things. If you weren't if you don't have that in your own situation, that's one issue. The other thing is, man, there's not a lot of Native American culture around for people to look at and say that's a sacred, beautiful thing, and not, oh, that's a cartoonish thing that we should participate in or laugh about when the situation arises. Nathan Phillips, who is a Vietnam War veteran, and who I enjoyed his comments after the fact when he said, "Man, those kids have a lot of energy. Imagine if they dedicated it to something more positive. How that would come out." You know, I love those comments like that, and I mean, again, if it's not part of your culture to see elders in a certain way, shape, or form, then yeah, you might find yourself in a situation, and they are being treated like grown men as far as like the bashing they're getting in the media. They might not got their eyes blackened in that moment, but they're taking a beating right now for sure.
Yeah, and why? Well, okay, so and you mentioned race relations, and it's something I wanted to talk about as well, which is why do you believe that race relations in the country are so tense right now? And I don't believe. Okay, I'm a kid who grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. I grew up with people flying Confederate flags, with all type of crazy stuff happening, and I'm just sitting there like, this doesn't feel. I don't think that the tension has been this high literally since the 60s, since the 50s
Yeah.
and the 60s in the civil rights movement. And I'm just sitting there like it is so tense. And I think a lot of that has to do with the what felt okay. I'll speak to me as a black man, right? And things that happened to my kids when they were so I have a daughter who's in high school now. Well, she's in college now. She's a freshman in college. She was in high school when Donald Trump got elected, and kids started coming to school saying, "Oh, good, we're gonna get all the Mexicans up out of here. White people are gonna take me back over." And it was just like, the kids are saying that. So where are they hearing this from? And like, I'm not gonna blame just Trump for this, because here's the thing that I say that I will agree with, is that I don't believe that all racists are Trump supporters. I'm sorry, that all Trump supporters are racist. However, all racists are Trump supporters. So those are two separate things.
Come on. Well, here's the deal. I'm married to somebody who's on the far left of the political spectrum. I tend to be more conservative.
Me too.
And the reason I think, and I've always felt like the reason that I was that way is because I'm from a real small town in a real rural place in Wyoming, and conservative governments, they're the ones that run those little places. You know, that there's not a lot of identity politics that comes into, do we have enough funding to keep the community center open? And, you know, there's just not a lot of national hot button issues at play in a lot of these small towns. And a lot of these are just older conservative people who are keeping the lights on in their city. I don't look at it from, you know, these massive issues and then work my way down to how I feel politically. I look at it as, who were the people that I was raised around? How did they live? And how did their governments function? But when I do see, you know, there are a lot of people on my team who seem to have been emboldened by a lot of the things that the guy in charge has said and ran on. You know, it's frustrating, because then you get into a position where you got a bunch of kids in MAGA gear, and all of your predisposed ideas of who these kids could be, whether exhibiting some type of cultural ignorance or chauvinism or disdain, or privilege in some way, shape, or form, whether or not that stuff's there, or even if it's only there in a tiny amount, you're going to see all of it pure and concentrated. And so, I mean, this was a bunch of gasoline and someone dropped a match on it. And so, you know, and somebody being on the more conservative side of things, you know, I didn't identify my politics in that issue. I immediately thought of my own experience, A, as a teacher, B, as someone who has a dad who was raised on a reservation, somebody who has a bunch of Native Americans in my family. Those were the spectrums that I viewed it from. And then maybe, third, the politics enter in. But for me, it was never political. This was a respect and a
Yeah.
safety issue. But it's very possible that we've created an environment where people are bringing this stuff from home. And when you get people in groups like that, and then there's conflict, people don't have the experience of saying like, actually, I've been around people who were Native American. I understand that
Yeah. Oh,
these
and
ceremonial songs are sacred.
and I mean, it's the same way I look at the border issue, because I was reading a study that whether you're Democrat, Republican, that people feel differently. The closer that you are to the southern border, you feel a lot differently than people further away from the border. And I was talking to my 12-year-old son about that, and he was kind of asking why. And I said, because you have to remember that so many people don't really leave that far away from their hometown. So they have no idea what it's like at a border, what it's like to cross a border, what it's like to go to another country, what life is really like there. And I was like, you're fortunate because you've been to 5 countries and you're 12 years old. I was like, so you have an idea. You've driven across borders in Mexico and in Canada. So you understand what the difference is. And a lot of these people who are scared about these issues, like, they don't live it. They've never been around it. So I think that the ignorance in the absence of knowledge, there's fear. In the absence of knowledge, you can make assumptions. And when you make assumptions on things that you don't have actual knowledge about, usually bad things come out of that.
And that's the thing. So we're more connected than we've ever been, but we're not more connected to each other. We're more connected to each other's isolation. We understand how fragmented that we are better than we've ever understood it before. But just because we have this ability to connect doesn't mean that I'm getting to know people that are different than me in other places. It just means that how separate I am from other people is become way more evident than it used to be.
Yeah. I wanted to move on to another big topic that was going on and that kind of hot button issue today, which is Chris Brown. So Chris Brown, whether he was detained or arrested, it depends on where you read, that he was arrested or detained in Paris for a rape charge. And I found that very, very interesting. And not because I'm a Chris Brown fan or any of this, but because I didn't look at it so much from a guilt or innocence. I think I initially was like, okay, here's another allegation to Chris Brown that has something to do with the people around him, because it was like 3 or 4 other people around him that were arrested as well, because it was in a hotel room that was in his name or paid for by him. And it got me to thinking. I was like, hold up. This is a problem which we have in society just in general, which is that Chris Brown has found himself in trouble now. He found himself in trouble in the Calabasas house, where somebody said that they got attacked or raped or something. There have been other allegations that were found that weren't true. And I'm like, this is a result of the people that you have around you. Like that, if you aren't doing this and the people around you have something to do with this, you need to change the people around you.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm a big Maurice Claret fan, huge Maurice Claret fan. I love the journey that he has been on. As a whole person, from where he comes from to the mistakes that he made, to the relapses that he's had, to everything that he tries to do to better himself and the community around him. I enjoy. I mean, enjoy. I'm inspired in some ways by what it is he's trying to do and what he's going through. And I think that if you have that ability to show grace, then you have the ability to enjoy the fruits of somebody's labor when they're trying to come back from a rough situation. And something that Maurice Claret said a few years back, and he said, take out a picture of you and all your friends, and you show me that picture of you and your friends, and I will show you your future. He said, if you would have had a picture of me and my friends at a certain age, intention to like put a stop to the length of that rap sheet, um, you're gonna be in these situations. And it's hard to feel sorry for somebody who has been in the situation before, and then finds itself in a situation again.
Yeah. See, I think that a lot of it has to do with okay. So I'll speak about it as a because I think some of it is a cultural issue as well. And this is where like cultural issues come in, where like when people make comments about it, people get called racist, but they're not racist. They come from a different place. Where you come from a small town, you come from a different place. So like people misunderstand sometimes when people say things as misogynist, racist, or whatever, when it's a cultural difference, a regional difference, all sorts of things. So, but I wanted to speak about Chris Brown in the sense of, okay, so he is a light-skinned black guy.
Okay.
And amongst black men, there's a general way when you hear things talked about, they're like, oh, here's their things that light-skinned guys do. Here are things that dark-skinned guys do. And it's more like if you're light skinned, you're usually considered soft, and you usually have to prove your metal, prove your worth, like because people automatically think that. And Chris Brown's an R&B singer. Add that on top of that, which is love making music. He was making teeny bop hits like Justin Bieber at first, and then you saw Justin Bieber start to go hang out with some hoodlums as well. And if you don't change your circle around you, trying to be tough, trying to be popular, trying to be hard, because Chris Brown, like, he hangs out with a lot of gang members. Like, he even says, like, in some of his songs, mentions Grape Street, all of this stuff. And it's just like, yo, like, you are putting yourself in a position hanging around certain people that these things are going to happen. And I know
and I mean, this is a guy who has been diagnosed bipolar, right? This is a guy who has been diagnosed with PTSD for whatever reason. Do you think friends like that understand how to handle the volatility that comes with dealing with a mental illness?
No, absolutely not. And it's like there's an element to where you don't want to leave the people that you came up with, the people that you grew up with, and you don't want to leave them behind. You want to bring them up and rise them up with you. But the reality is that you have to make changes, and then if they want to come along with that, then they can come. And you can try to show them the way, but you can't have them doing their same old stuff and you're trying to do something new and be like, no, I'm bringing them up with me. No, they drag you back down. So you have to figure out what life direction that you want your life to take. And then tell your friends, family, whoever, like, yo, like, here's the direction I'm going. If you want to come with me on this path, come on, man. Come on. We're going to do it together. But if you want to stay on that old path, you're going to be on the old path solo, because I'm not going down that road. And until Chris Brown decides that that's the road that he's going to be on, he's going to continuously find himself in trouble.
Well, and I mean, you look at all these artists who have gone through phases where the people are that they choose to be around help put them in situations that end up going beyond the scope of their control, and those are typically phases. They're either phases because it ended poorly, or phases because they grew out of it. Chris Brown is living it out completely. I mean, he on his way to Bobby Brown territory. If things don't change for long enough, then the longer that things don't change, the more that's who you are.
Yep.
And then you're the friend, and then you're the one that bends the environment to toxic, no matter who you're around.
Now that's a good point too, is that we're talking about the people around him, but then he's being an influence on the people around him as well. My criticism of Chris Brown for the last few years, besides the people that he hangs around, is that he's so extremely talented. Like, he's like Michael Jackson talented. Like, I mean, he took what Michael Jackson could dance, took it up a notch. He can sing, he can act, he can do all these things. And I have a problem, and maybe I sound like the old guy, the get off my lawn dad, but I have a problem with the fact that Chris Brown is so talented and that his music now is not legendary. His music is like current pussy popping music. I'm gonna do, how many women can I sleep with? How many this, that, or whatever. And it's not gonna be able to be played at the family barbecue 20 years from now, where Michael Jackson will. But you have Justin Bieber will be able to be played, his last album. You have like Beyonce. You have all these amazing transcendent artists, Usher. You have all these that will be able to be played. Yes, they have some of that music too, but their hits will last. And I don't think that Chris Brown's music, the newer stuff, is legendary like that.
Oh, and you gotta have mass appeal with it, right? He had a single off his last album, "Heartbreak on a Full Moon," "Pills and Automobiles."
Yeah,
like, come on, man. Hey, but opiate use is up. Maybe he's betting long term. So that's the new future, right? Cars and pills, and he's just ahead of the game, maybe. But I look at it that way, and just as a dad, like, I'm probably not going to be letting my kids listen to Chris Brown. Now, they're going to listen to whatever they listen to. They're going to find a way, right? But I'm not going to encourage it. It's not going to be what I put on when we're driving around. So I mean, you're cutting people off anyway for the ability to. And I think a lot of that legendary music that spans time, is music that you can listen to together with other people outside of just the club, right? Like if you take something by, people are going to be singing "Party in the USA" by Miley Cyrus, and it's just as simple and it's just as poppy as a lot of the stuff Chris Brown does, but it's going to be relevant as long as we still have a country 10 years from now. It's going to be relevant then, just like it is now. A lot of what Chris Brown puts in his music mirrors the way that he lives. Very temporary, very for the moment. And so you make music for the moment, and the moment passes, your music's gone.
Oh, I 100% agree with that. Ralph, you are 100% right. And the last thing I want to talk about today is a thing that you brought up. To me, you brought a story to me. I hadn't even seen it, about Jim Harbaugh, because we talk about these college coaches making so much money, making, upwards of, how many coaches? I think there are 14 or 15 coaches making at least $5 million a year now, and some of them
we're up to like 10 or 12 assistant coaches making over $1 million.
Yeah. So all these people are getting rich, making millions on the back of these college football players and basketball players. But we're not even going to talk about that issue. We're going to talk about the fact that Jim Harbaugh, for the 6th time, has offered a middle schooler a scholarship. A middle schooler, 12, 13, 14 years old. What's up with that, Ralph? Because you cover high school kids in Arizona, you know them intimately. Like, how does this affect them, and what the hell is this?
I mean, I don't know. He knows. Jim Harbaugh knows what he's doing. He knows that it's going to get picked up in the press that he offered a 13-year-old an uncommittable offer. Like, he knows what that's going to do. He knows that it's going to cause people like us to talk about it. But here we are, and I feel weird even. I mean, all the articles are out there. I feel weird even saying this kid's name out loud. This 13-year-old who he offered, who has a Twitter, and who announced the offer the same way that a 17-year-old 5-star would announce an offer from Michigan.
He had an edit?
No, let me read it to you. Blessed to receive my first offer from University of Michigan, and being the youngest athlete to receive an offer from UM, #making history. And he did that thing where he put in the 4 different photos, one of him out there posing. And so, I mean, he's already embracing it. And I guess if the kid can handle it, but
there is no kid that can handle it. These are unreal, unsustainable expectations. Because first and foremost, this offer, because you have to put it in quotes, because it's not real, it's non-existent, it's non-binding. Like, the school doesn't have to keep up with it. That assumes that you hit a projection that you may not hit. It's unfair to the kid, setting unfair expectations upon him. which changes his life, his parents, how it depends on how they react to it. Because if Jim Harbaugh offers my kid, I'm gonna tell you, get the hell out of my face. like he will absolutely not be going to Michigan. I promise you that. Because you're not getting ready to change our whole life and change this kid's thinking at 12 years old, 13 years old, because you want a news headline.
Yeah, you are altering the brain chemistry of a child with an offer like this. There is in no circumstance could you even squint and say, no, this is a good idea. And one of the issues is, and like you said, you lived it. And so you can say, like, if you shouldn't be coming around my kid.
Yeah.
When he's 13, let him play, let him earn it. When he gets to high school and everybody's talking about recruiting and everybody's talking about offers, then we'll see. But when your kid is 13 years old, you are changing the trajectory of that kid's life. By offering that kid, you're changing who comes around them.
Yep.
You're changing who tries to offer them. You're changing who tries to get into these parents' lives. And the parents think they want it. Here's the deal. The parents think that this is what they want, but it's going to change the parent more than it's going to change the kid. I deal with wild parents on a daily basis, either ones who are desperate for that kind of attention or ones who already have it and then have to morph into essentially a protective shell if they don't completely embrace the role of a handler, right? And so, we've had some really, really popular athletes down here in the state of Arizona. Marvin Bagley, guys like that.
He went to Sierra Canyon right up the street, man.
He went to Sierra Canyon, and before that, he was down here in Arizona at the same high school as DeAndre Ayton. He went to the same school. And before that, he went to the same school that I told you ended up in that Fox News report. He went to Corona del Sol, the one that got in trouble for the Make America Great Again stuff. And so, like, you're around these dads of supremely talented athletes, and what you start to notice is, the better that their kid is and the more attention that they get, the harder it is for the parent to have any type of grip on what is going on, because they feel incredibly isolated. They feel incredibly alone. When they get these feelings, I've been on the end of quite a few tongue lashings from parents just because they're frustrated with other stuff that is going on. And it's something I completely understand. Like my oldest, he's not really into sports all that much. He's kind of an indoor kid. He's all right at chess, though. And I'm trying to imagine a situation if 3 years from now, when he's 13, people are out there writing articles about him.
Yeah, talking about he's the next Bobby Fischer.
Exactly.
And inviting him to Omaha to that big chess tournament.
I would go crazy. I would go absolutely crazy. And that's only if 3 or 4 people were writing articles about him and his chess skills and my parenting decisions. This 13-year-old had an article in USA Today about how Jim Harbaugh, like, people who get this paper for free in hotels are going to be reading about this 13-year-old committing to marriage. I still remember Derek Callender, who never really ended up being anything in the NBA, but I read about him in an ESPN the magazine article when he was a 6'9", 260-pound 14-year-old.
Yep. Yeah.
And there are people who track this kid for the rest of his life now.
Yeah. And it's just phenomenal how people don't realize the implications of it. So I love how you brought up the parents, because imagine if you're a parent and you have a kid, you're trying to guide your kid, instill the proper values into them, and then you have people around him that are trying to be a part of his life that are yes men and that have an agenda, and they're trying to undermine your parenting. And they're like, oh man, your parents just hating on you, blah, blah, blah. Because imagine this. I was in high school, top-notch athlete. And I had to have a 3.5 to play ball. I came back with like a 3.5. Yeah, I came back with like a 3.5. No, I had to have like a 3.7 or something. Something ridiculous. And I came with like a
ridiculous. I like it.
But I was salutatorian. Like there was like, like this is something I could do. I just wasn't putting in the effort that I needed to. So my dad made me quit I had a 3.4, 3.5. My dad made me quit the baseball team in the middle of the season because my grades weren't right. And that was one of and then when I had to quit the team, he made me go tell the coach. He didn't tell the coach. I had to go tell the coach. So then, like, it was frustrating for me, but at the same time, like, it was a lesson because I have a 12-year-old who is supposed to be hot stuff, right? And I am not afraid to pull him out of sports if he's not doing what he's supposed to do. But it is, though, like, honestly, I will have to admit, it is a last resort now because, and it's changed the way that I parent, changed the way I discipline because I want to keep him on the right track because I don't want to pull him out. But at the same time, I will if I have to. But it's changed from, okay, from a, if you're not getting your schoolwork done or you're not putting forth the effort, I take everything else away first. And then, so he had a little bit of trouble at the beginning of his 7th grade year, which was this year. So we took things away. And then the last thing that was going away was sports. And it was crazy because in actuality, if he were not this supposed to be phenom, it probably would have been one of the first things to take away. Right. And so it does change you. But now looking back on it, I'm like, hold up. No. I'm taking away what he loves first. Like I'm taking away what matters the most to try to motivate him. But thank God we didn't get to that point. But that's just to speak to the fact that it does change the parenting as well.
So then in that situation, if your kid had a Michigan offer and you're trying to say, I have the authority to take football away from you, your kid looks you right back in the face and says, well, it's not going to matter because as soon as I'm out of this house, Jim Harbaugh says I can play football. Who are you to say that I can't? And it's just, I feel like in some way, shape, or form, it undermines, imagine if that dad or that mom decided to sit their kid their freshman year.
Yep. And then the kid is like, oh, well, I didn't get my offer because you did this, you did that, and everybody's blaming you instead of blaming the kid because the kids don't get enough responsibility now. Like parents take a lot of the responsibility off the kids. Oh, no, Johnny isn't doing good in school. It's the teacher's fault. He's not playing well. The coach is hating on him. No, sometimes Johnny needs to get his stuff together, man.
It's hard enough to live in the tension that you're that the effects of your decisions as a parent could have ramifications for your kid, for their relationships, for how your home functions on a daily basis.
Yep.
It's hard enough without having to worry what Greg from Albuquerque, New Mexico thinks too, because he read an article about your son in USA Today. So Harbaugh's done some weird stuff, some super weird stuff. And I think that you can acknowledge some of the stuff he's done and say like, oh, that's strange. I wouldn't do that. That doesn't necessarily fit with my worldview. But this, to me, I feel like is a universal no-no. Like, please don't be offering scholarships that aren't actual scholarship offers to my junior hire.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that is 100% wrong. And it's totally bad. And I wanted to look at, because you talked about the media, and I wanted to take it back for just a second to what we were talking about earlier, which was the Covington Catholic kids who were in D.C., which is, so the media has blown up this situation with Jim Harbaugh offering a middle school kid, 12 or 13-year-old kid. And then the Covington Catholic kids, like the media has had these kids like demonized and all of this. Which like, yes, some of it was their own fault, but at the same time, they're kids. And I believe that when you do this, that you actually affect the hearts of these kids as well, because imagine what these kids think from and what the people around them are saying, because if they don't have respect for elders, if they already feel like that they're better or something, then imagine how this just reinforces their beliefs about, oh, it's people on the left. They hate you. They're trying to steal America. They're trying to change your way of life. Like, and then it feels right because they feel attacked as opposed to treating them like kids. And because love is what changes things. It's not like trying to force people to do something, because just like if you fire somebody who says something racist, that doesn't stop their racist beliefs. It actually only reinforces
the thorn
it
from your foot, right?
Yeah.
So, here's the thing. If you have someone at the New York Times who's a 68-year-old columnist that writes a column that is directed toward the kids involved in this, and it just says, respect your elders, you racist. And you're an elder, right? And you're an elder. Yeah, I don't see the kids learning from
Yeah.
that. And here's the other thing. Shame works, and we use it as a weapon. We are constantly as a society using shame as a weapon to get what we want and make us feel more comfortable about the worldviews and things that are going on around us. If we can shame you into not saying the thing that we don't like, then we're more comfortable because we don't have to hear that thing.
Yep.
Shame does not work the same way for kids. They grew up in an economy of shame. We're talking to the shameless generation. There were all these people that tried to shame the Parkland students. Remember that?
Yep.
For having their views based on their experience. They all came out and they said, you kids don't know anything. You're not experienced. You need to think this way. You need to do this. You need to do that. And every single one of those kids that was being trolled online, it was like they were impervious to it. It was like they were invincible. We're trying to shame kids who grew up in an economy of shame. I don't think it's going to work. I think the only way to get through to kids like this is to give them the why behind the what. You don't do something like this because of this. Now participate in this dialogue with me. Do you understand? There is no other way. You cannot shame. I'm trying it with my kids. Just this morning, my kids made me like 10 minutes late for school or to drop them off at school. And I'm just, I get this urge to say, like, people will think that you don't care. Like, if you're the one who's showing up late at school every single day, people will think bad about you. People will think bad about me. And my kids don't want to hear any of that.
Yep.
It made absolutely zero impact of me trying to say, like, it's an embarrassment for you to show up late every single day. And I'm like, no, it's worse for me to actually have to wake up 5 minutes earlier. That's what's worse for me. So I think the kids are just completely impervious to being shamed.
Ralph, that is the most brilliant thing I've heard in 2019. I mean, and maybe all of 2018 about the kids being impervious to a shame because they grow up in a society where shame is used as a weapon and it works on adults. But if you notice, it doesn't work on kids because they grow up in the listen. I'm not gonna let you shame me. So the actual shame works the other way. It actually works counterproductive. It's like no body shaming, no faith shaming, no this. So it's like it only pushes you further to the corner and only galvanizes the strength of whatever group it is. I like that.
Well, kids learn from us. We have these sacred things and we freak out about these sacred things. That's why I've started watching your stuff, the Unafraid Show. Because if you're not able to talk about certain things, if you shut down when your idols are challenged, kids pick up on that and they don't want any part of it. It's the reason we're always a pendulum swinging back and forth. It's the reason that one generation is a product of a bunch of failed marriages, and guess what? Their kids don't want to get married. I wonder why. And so we're in a situation where everything offends us and we're freaking out about everything. The next generation coming up, the Tosh.0 generation, they're going to make fun of everything. There will be no more sacred things because sacred things are what created our ability to freak out about all this other stuff. And so that statement from the kid where he was just completely appalled that he had been victimized by the media and all these people saying that he was, racist and everything like that, you could tell that was written by his parents.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
You could tell. Because would the kid that was standing in front of that Nathan Phillips with the smirk on his face the entire time, did that look like a statement that came from that kid?
No, he didn't. He was DGF. He didn't care. Yep. He didn't care, and he would have told you he didn't care too. But he was coached up, and you are 100% Ralph. You guys are listening to the Unafraid Show. George Reister here, and I have my man who's going to be here with me every week, Ralph Amsden. Faith, fatherhood, family, food, and sports, all wrapped into one, which is the Unafraid Show. Ralph, thank you for joining me today, dude. You dropped so much knowledge today, man. I feel like we had a great discussion. I hope people enjoy it. You guys, please make sure you share the feed, download the podcast, which will be up in a little bit, and tell a friend about the Unafraid Show. Anything you want to say before we get out of here, Ralph?
I appreciate you. I appreciate everything you do. I'm happy to be part of it.
All right. Peace out, guys. Thank you guys as usual. Yeah. Peace out.